Hello, this is Chris Cooper, and a big welcome to the Business Elevation Show. It's fantastic to be back with you again. I'm delighted to share with you. We've turned 14 years old today. Actually, it's not today, it was on Tuesday. So, this is episode 612, and I've got a fantastic guest for you today. We're going to be talking about mapping your territory with explorer and entrepreneur Anthony Willoughby. Before I introduce you to Anthony, I'd like to say a big thank you to my guest last week, to Julie Wignall. And we were talking about fireflies last week, and we were talking about the some amazing stories from her book about people who are making a big difference in the world, and not necessarily we're not talking about people here who are necessarily wealthy. She was talking about people doing amazing things within indigenous populations, and there's a lovely example in there about an orchestra that was literally created out of rubbish on a spoiled tip, and they're now playing all over the globe. So very interesting that conversation last week, and I just sort of took away from that how important it is to be connecting people who really bring light into the world, really bring energy into the world, and are really working to help solve and collect the world's problems and to connect us together. Which is why I think community is so important, and why I lead a community. I'm sure many of you do too, called the Elevation Collective. So, what this show is about, it's about helping you by introducing you to fantastic guests who are really lighting up the world that they're working in and contributing, whether it's through business or not for profit. They're contributing to good and looking to improve the world right now, which can seem quite dark at times. So my guest today, Anthony Willoughby, has had a really extraordinary life. He grew up in Africa, spent decades in Japan. We actually met a few weeks ago. He visited my home, and he's just informed me after 5 weeks ago he's been to Japan twice since then. So he's really travelled. He's spent lots of time in some really remote and challenging landscapes. He's an explorer. He's an entrepreneur. And he's the founder of the Nomadic School of Business and the creator of territory mapping, which is a really unique methodology that we're going to find out about today. It's inspired by indigenous wisdom, and he helps lots and lots of leaders with this tool. Got some amazing companies he's worked with, like Dyson and Ferrari and IBM and AXA in Asia. So we're going to hear some stories today, no doubt, from some of his experience with tribes in places like Papua New Guinea and Mongolia and Kenya and Australia. And whether you're leading a business, a team, or you're simply looking to help and evolve your own life, I think the insights today will be really helpful. This concept of territory mapping is fascinating. So a big welcome to my guest today, to Anthony Willoughby. How are you?
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be with you. Much appreciated and deeply honored. And the work you're doing with your communities is just fantastic. So I share your vision.
Well, thank you. And maybe you've been to Japan a couple of times in the last few weeks. You usually travel. Where's home for you?
In theory, in Suffolk, but I'm eighth generation expatriate, as you kindly mentioned, brought up in Africa. So it's never really quite been my home anywhere. And years ago, I wrote a book called In Search of Inspiration. And the opening line is, I believe I'm the first generation with the freedom of choice to shape my own destiny since my ancestors left the cave. And I think in the past, our identity has come from knowing our place, knowing our purpose, knowing where we come from. And that is what I think we haven't got anymore, and me in particular. So I've really spent my life trying to work out, so what is that place? What is that relevance with no real place of abode and or calling it home? But if you actually think about most people's nationalities, it's simply done by governments to make sure you pay your taxes. I mean, they really don't give you much. So I think it's now time for us, each individual, to realize we are responsible for our own destiny and our own life and our own peace of mind, our own well-being. And obviously, I've been privileged in many of those areas. But I just think that where are you from is such a funny comment that we all ask each other. But maybe it's just we're human trying to be relevant. Anyway, sorry, it's not quite the answer to your question, but
Yeah. No, I think it's a really important question, and I may have shared on this show before. I was inspired by somebody who was we were really talking about indigenous populations, and she said to me, everybody actually, we have an indigenousness. We originate from somewhere, and afterwards we talked about where I came from. So it led to me doing my ancestry DNA, which was insightful and helpful to see those influences. Just tell us a little bit. So you've lived in Africa. You said you were brought up. Whereabouts in Africa? And
My father was a military attaché in the Sudan, was on the Canal Zone in
ah,
Egypt. So until I was 9, I was brought up primarily in the Sudan. And then taking paddle steamers down the Nile and those sorts of adventures that are still deep, deep, deep inside me. And I think anybody who has spent their formative early years in Africa, you'll never get your bare feet and running feral sort of out of your heart and soul.
that must, yeah, that must be a fascinating way to be brought up. And was there a big expat community, or were you very much
Oh, I
yeah,
think there was a few foreigners there. I remember sort of being at the Nativity play, and I'm sure there were a few other foreigners, but it was just that lovely sense of freedom of sort of keeping pet scorpions and being on the Nile. It was just a lovely, lovely way of that sense of freedom and possibilities growing up.
amazing? And so you spent 9 years there. What happened to you next?
I was then dropped into an English boarding school.
Ah,
And literally it was like being a puppy dog, sort of dropped into a system that I just found completely strange. So I spent 10 years, as I describe it, at a place that taught effortless insincerity and arrogance without an iota of substance, where everything was around social rituals and not how you contributed.
yeah.
It had a deep, deep effect on me of being totally the outsider and always feeling, and I think it's a privilege to feel outsider. But when my housemaster got hold of me when I was about 17, he said, Anthony, let's talk about your future. So I thought this is going to be quite exciting. And he told me these wonderful words, which I will never forget. And he emphasized it. You are far, far, far too stupid to go to university.
Ah.
And that moment of magnificent freedom, it just sort of, I felt all of the shackles were off, that I could finally get to living a life that was my own. And I was then offered an exchange to a school in America. And that was when suddenly you had freedom. So
Mm.
from prefects in bowler hats or whatever hats they were wearing, and this authority and have you done the right button up, to arriving in America in '69, just before Kent State, the moratorium and bombing of Cambodia, and the head of school going, right, we're going on strike next week, teacher, and this sudden sense of freedom was extraordinary. And it was then when I started hitchhiking. So I've hitchhiked through about 35 of the 50 states. And suddenly I had freedom. And suddenly I realized that people are always going to be nice to me, whether I was hitchhiking by private aircraft or anywhere else. People were always nice to me. And I think that was a fundamental part of my education. So I left school at 19, never went near a university. But I think the time in America, the time in South America, gave me that sense of the world, we are free. We
Mm.
really, really do have that freedom. So what is our responsibility? We need to discover in ourselves and in others to live that sense of an individual with a community's perspective.
And that's what I mean, what an amazing opportunity to do all of that traveling. But it must have been like from the freedom that you had to then for 10 years being in a school system must have felt a bit like prison. And then you were kind of, in some ways, um, uh, is that a fair reflection? Because you
No,
suddenly
I
have these
mean,
rules and
it was a complete prison. And I think, we were talking earlier, but, that's when I went off to Japan, hopped on a one-way ticket on the Trans-Siberian Express, arrived in Tokyo, in Yokohama by boat in '73. And I obviously did various things, but then I headed off on a camel safari in Kenya. And that was the first time I saw the Maasai.
Mm.
And what I saw there were people who had absolute substance without any arrogance. They
Yeah,
had presence. You've been there in
yeah.
Saba.
I spent
Just
time. I
seeing
spent
them.
time with the Maasai tribe. Yeah,
Yeah, they don't say, where are you from? Where's this? What's it? They just shake you by the hand, sit down, share some food with them, and
yeah,
invite you round the fire. And you suddenly think, well, why can't we do this in our society?
yeah, The- yeah,
And that was really the impact when I saw of just how wrong we've got it, that level, the low trust and all the rest. The Maasai, they just had it. And so that's all 45 years ago. And that was the beginning of thinking, what is it we've got to discover that we've forgotten? And that's really been my life journey so far.
that's amazing. I stayed with the Maasai tribe maybe 10 years ago, perhaps. And the first was I entered into the village and had a conversation with the head of the tribe.
Yeah,
First thing that was said to me was in Mao, in our language, we don't have a word for stranger.
right.
So while you're here, you're family.
Yeah.
And I thought, right, wow,
They mean it.
yeah, and it was true. Wow.
Yeah, I never forget my father telling me a story in the Sudan. He was a military attaché there, as I say, and he was chatting to a new minister, a Sudanese minister, and he said, you've got to come round for lunch. So the chap said, oh, thank you very much indeed. 4 days later, at 11:45, thank you so much for the invitation. I will be round with my five best friends. I mean, it's just this effortless insincerity
Mm.
that we sort of take for granted. And that was sort of what really, really impacted me. What they say is what they mean. I mean, a couple of stories I quite like. I remember once seeing a group of Maasai and I said, so who's the leader here? And they looked at me bemused. I simply said, so what is the problem you're trying to solve? Everybody in our community is a leader. If you can tell us the problem, we will tell you the most suitable person to solve it. And then another one I loved, we were talking to the chief warrior up on the Laikipia. And we said, so he said, yeah, I'm retiring next year. So we said, well, how will you know if you've done a good job? He said, well, in 5 years' time, when the fellow's done a better job than me, then I know I've been successful.
Ah,
Why don't we have this sort of building a culture around respect, responsibility, and courage? Every 3-year-old lives that life. What do? We suck that responsibility away from kids. What is it at the moment? 20% of kids are not turning up for school, but apparently something like that. I mean, could you imagine if 20% of cars crashed?
mm.
Don't you think someone would say we've got to change the system? So how can we instill, that joy of the Maasai kid, running around with their goat at the age of 3, that energy, that excitement? Anyway, that's
Yeah.
digressing, but
Oh, I completely get it. It's yeah, I completely having had my own kids going through the school system and the challenges of it and getting daily notes. Your son was 1 minute late today. Your son was 2 minutes late today, and it's like we just ignored them in the end.
yeah.
But the poor lad was completely destroyed by the end of his A levels by pettiness, actually.
Yeah, I mean, my own kids, when I sent them, when they were 16, I sent them off to live with the Maasai for a week and then go off on other adventures in Africa. They went off with a mate, and I just think it is just so important just to have that rites of passage.
Yeah. Do you think now, Anthony, one of the things, we for many years, probably hundreds of years, the white person has ignored the indigenous populations and often downtrod them. There's stories all over the globe of this. You spend a lot of time in Australia and in the United States, the Reddit, etc. But actually, there was so much wisdom And I think it's only now that people are starting to realize we became completely detached from it.
Yeah,
What's your view on that?
I mean, I completely and utterly agree. I mean, I think it is this poison we're all sold that if you get trinkets, you'll be successful. So
Yeah.
from the age of 3, you're told if you've got a good memory, you're very, very clever, so you can get on to a top university. What is a top university? What does it do to develop the character? So, I mean, I completely agree with you. Yeah, we've got to start to develop characters that, I mean, it's a given in any indigenous community, the respect, the responsibility, and that courage, as I was saying earlier, creates trust.
Mm,
And that's really what I've been learning from my time, in any indigenous community. I'm sure you've been in them as well. It just seems to be universal, this sense of presence, of confidence, of welcome, of bringing people around your fire.
yes.
And we've lost it. And can we go back to it? Well, I think there might be ways, but anyway.
Yes. And joy.
Yeah, sheer joy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's this trinket acquisition that has really sort of poisoned all of us. So we judge people on their trinkets and not on their contribution.
Mm, mm.
Which goes
That,
back to my comments earlier, sorry, on the whole idea we need to feel relevant. And we need to feel relevant for ourselves in how we contribute and how we look after communities, and not from the relevance of the trinkets that we drive around in.
yeah. Yeah. And how do we get back to that?
Well, I'm working on that at the moment. I'm actually talking to neuroscientists at the moment. And because I think I told you what I do is I get everybody to draw maps. And that idea came from having been in Kenya and seen the Masa. I thought, wow, what is it we've lost? And I was back in Tokyo chatting to a friend. He said, so what are you going to do to look for it more? I said, oh, I'm off to Papua New Guinea. And that afternoon, I rang the Papua New Guinea embassy, met a chap called Jerry Ibarami. 2 days later, he says the ambassador would like to meet you. I met Joseph Nombri, the Papua New Guinea ambassador to Tokyo, who remembers first contact in the late 40s. And I said, sir, what have you got that we've lost? He said, I really don't know. Why don't you go to my village and find out?
Great question.
So literally, that's what I did. I headed off to Papua New Guinea, into the highlands, into the Chimbu area by Mount Hagen up there. And yeah, it was pretty wild. People were still running around with feathers, spears, and shields. And I asked one, I said, why do you have so many feathers? And the chap said, well, a big man or woman has many feathers, but a bigger man or woman can hand out their feathers. So I thought, well, I know people in Tokyo who hoard their feathers because they think it's powerful.
Mm,
They think it gives them a sense of relevance and identity because they hoard all their feathers. So I could see that relevance. And I said, what about the spear? They said, well, you can't sell it, you can't buy it, and you can't give it away. You have to accept the responsibility of it and earn it. So again, I thought of people who thought because they had director on their name card, they were entitled to respect. And then I asked the ambassador about the shield, and he said, well, you need a strong shield in front, but you actually need a stronger shield of people protecting your back. So, you've probably never thought about feathers, spears, and shields, but you can imagine people who've got them, who give them away, who hoard them, and who are isolated and who've got strong. So, to me, I could instantly see that. So, when I said to him, asked the ambassador, I said, so what is the single most important thing in your life? And I remember thinking he'd say his house, his car, or something like that. He just banged on the table, looked at me and said, it is my territory.
mm.
So we were sitting in the American Club. He then drew a map on a napkin and he explained his world to me over the next 2 hours. When the sun goes over these mountains, this is when we plant, this is this. And I suddenly realized for the first 99.9% of human existence, our identity and our relevance had come from knowing a map and what we were protecting. And so I realized, what am I hunting, protecting, and growing? I had absolutely no idea. I had a small desk, and that really sort of sent me off on my different journeys. And started the first outdoor team building center. But then Thomson and Reuters were actually about to get together to work on a project, which I said, I don't want a team building. What I really want is people to be able to talk to each other. So I said, well, look, can I try something? And he said, yes, you can. I said, well, look, this is a map from Papua New Guinea. They know what they're hunting, protecting, and growing. Can you draw a map of what you're hunting, protecting, and growing? And amazingly, instantly, Thomson Reuters could draw a map showing the rivers that they needed to cross, the villages that they were protecting, the mammoths that they were hunting, and the green grass and the relationships that they were growing. And I suddenly, this is 1999, so 26 years ago, and that was the first time I saw that I believed we were tapping into our genetic memory.
Mm.
Or deep inside people was that ability to draw a map. And since then, I must have asked 10 or 15,000 people to draw these maps, whether I'm with Aboriginals in Australia, with Japanese executives, with orphans in Japan, with billionaires in America, with saying Aboriginals in Australia, with tribes in Kenya. Everybody seems to be able to draw a map and clearly explain how they see their life. And this is what I believe. We have been robbed from our maps. We've been robbed from being able to say, I'm on this side of the river. I need help to get to that side of the river. You know, I'm working with a wonderful Aboriginal woman called Elizabeth, who drew this fire, drew the trees. How do we have one seed or one tree that we can have one story? So what I believe we're doing through this methodology is we are really, really tapping back into our pre-civilization brain. And that is what I think we need to do, because civilization is really all around trinket acquisition and 30% of people being enslaved. It really is. And it's not from the contribution. So as I say, what I've discovered is everybody can draw these maps. And once they can talk about it, then they can start to feel that they are empowered, they are worthy, they are. Because obviously I've been very lucky on the different journeys that I've been on, and it's fantastic. But, you know, to someone living on the streets of Wrexham who we've worked with, an amazing bloke called Harry, that man has got more life experience in his little finger than I will have in, you know, 3 lifetimes, because he knows what it's like to live on the streets. And I think we've got to start valuing life experience, because it shows what does trust mean, what is responsibility, and taking people back to a point where they can feel proud of themselves. Sorry, again, that's a long answer to your point, but I hope it's in line with what you're thinking as well.
And when you draw these maps, because you've done thousands with people, what differences do you see between your Aboriginal person in the outback versus, say, an executive in Japan, in Tokyo?
I mean, I know this sounds very strange. You honestly can't tell the difference.
Mm.
I mean, the most amazing thing was doing it with billionaires in America, the billionaire family. And they all had their rivers and their trees and what they wanted to grow and the faith that they wanted to recognize and that. And it was exactly the same as with a homeless center in Wrexham. The same tree, the same river, the same bridges that they needed to have those values. So I think this is really deep inside each other, you know, inside anybody. These maps are just extraordinary, and every time someone draws a map, I see something new and different and exciting.
Mm. And how much? I mean, with the map, I'm just trying to sort of get my head around. I can imagine somebody drawing in, in an indigenous village, drawing the territory of where they live and where they hunt, and and the river they have to be careful of because they need it. It support nourishes them, but maybe it could flood at a certain. You've got crocodiles in it, and so what are an example of a river, for example, that your billionaire might draw?
Well, the ones I've got is just really trying to get their family onto the other side of that river.
I
And in
see.
fact,
Yeah.
they drew a circle around a tree, which were how do they create the bridge so that the roots will sort of protect those bridges that they want to build over the water and actually bring people around that tree and that same sort of sense of fire of warmth. Obviously, when we're doing it with indigenous people, their maps are more topographical.
Yeah.
Uh, I once had a wonderful time. I was actually doing it with Princess Nandi Zulu, who had joined through some friend of a friend in South Africa. And I was talking about how do you see your territory, the challenges and everything. She said, "Isn't that getting a bit personal?" To which I had to say, "Yes, Princess, but we don't normally have people who've got their own empires, 8 million Zulus." Um, but that is obviously talking about it. But then, so you've got the maps of the Maasai. I've got a sort of their village, looking after the cattle and where are the green pastures. That's quite simple. And then they drew one about their culture. And that was showing how, hunting the lion was no longer there, but how they see them moving from milk, meat, and blood to money, friendship, and happiness.
Oh.
So what the map sort of does is so you can start to focus on, so where do you feel most comfortable? Where do you feel most relevant? Where do you feel most excited? What is it that do you want to climb those mountains? How far away are they? The other thing that is we include sort of swamps, and yes, with the homeless people, it's extraordinary how much they feel they're in swamps. But the map can start to help them think this is a way out. I mean, this chap living on the streets of Wrexham, he drew a map that literally said, that I've got, prison, death, and a question mark in the middle. So it really, really gets to a very real depth of how people see things.
Mm.
But it's not for me to be intrusive. So whether we're working with an organization looking at what their future is, and on most questions, we just get people to imagine they're looking down on their world. How do they see it? And I know it's strange for people listening to it. What is this man talking about? But it just seems that inside everybody there is this genetic memory, this genetic map that people can start to talk about and tap into, and it seems to be powerful for them.
Well, we're going to get a commercial break now, and after the break, maybe have a little think during the break as to what your territory might look like, and maybe I can ask Anthony on our behalf after the break, some tips on how to do this. So maybe you can start to think about for yourself what is your territory map. Um, we'll be back again with you in just a couple of minutes, so do join us after the break. Hi, this is Chris Cooper. I'm with Anthony Willoughby, and we're talking about mapping your territory at the moment. And Anthony's shared some fascinating stories around his background and also the indigenous populations he spent time with, and explained universal relevance and the territory mapping. And he's talked about the challenges of people being very focused on trinkets and putting systems in place that restrict freedom. And so Anthony, there's an opportunity here for people to express their own freedom, I guess, in the creativity around drawing their own map. What does your map look like? What can you give us a?
Yeah, I can. And it was almost sort of, it was back in 1994, so 31 years ago. And I was actually with a couple of business partners as to how we saw the future of the business. And I sort of imagined myself about across a desert, and a long way off, I could see a mountain range. And over the other side of that mountain range, I thought the only things people need are trust and willpower. And if they trust themselves and if they feel they can do things, they will be more successful. I mean,
Yes.
that's when I went off and climbed some reasonable high mountains and other things I've done in my life. That was the whole company I set up called I Will Not Complain. The reason it was called I Will Not Complain was because we had 24 bottles of wine on an expedition across Papua New Guinea and no food. And one bloke complained every single step of the way. So for all future expeditions, everybody had signed document, I will not complain if I get eaten or trodden on by animals, exported, etc. So it was sort of to do that. But it really was following a map across Papua New Guinea. And that's when I started to really see that. I mean, I'm sure you've done many journeys when you look at a map and it suddenly comes to life, right? You're
Mm,
now on the map, you're
yes.
seeing that. It's just so exciting.
Yes.
And it was sort of almost out of, I thought, yeah, well, I've got this little notepad. I thought, why don't we all just draw a map of what we're trying to do? So I saw these mountains ahead, and I thought, I've got three things I need to collect on this before I can get there. The first is money, the second is experience, and the third is the people that I can do it. I then imagined by 2000, I'd hit the mountain range, go straight through it, get to the top of the hill, wander down, and I would set up a sort of health farm for trust and willpower. Easy. And once I got to the top of the hill, which was about 2000, I saw that actually the concepts of trust and willpower were miles away. It was through all of the apathy, the structure, the security, the arrogance, of everybody being, I'm so successful, I've got a BMW and I've got a director on my name card. I mean, the noughties were just full of that. So I started to realize that actually that is the old wealth model. So if you imagine sort of further out on the map with the word the trust and willpower, beyond that, there's the wealth, there's the old wealth model. And I sort of felt before you get to that, I sort of crossed the desert myself and through the jungles. I thought, right, I'm going to set up camp. And I thought, right, I'll set up camp to invite people around the fire. And what I thought is around that fire, it's still trust and willpower, but it's around how do you feel relevant? How do you know that you're relevant in your life? And from my time with the indigenous people and the communities, I believe relevance is feeling you're using the power of your personality.
Mm.
And I ask you, on a daily basis, do you think most employees feel they're really, really using that power of their personality? They're really feeling that they are valued. Do they also think that they're using that life experience, all of those things they've been through, or are they just going to threaten the boss if they say, I've seen this before, I think we should be doing it differently? And with the Maasai, they say, the small boy sees the lion, the hyena first.
Mm.
So you've got to use your life experience. And I believe if you've got the power of your personality, the wealth of your life experience, then your status, relevance, and sense of belonging will come from how you contribute. And I think this is what I saw for so many people. They can't use the power of their personality. They can't use the wealth of their life experience, and they don't know how they contribute. So I thought, how do we give people that? And I thought this is really when I looked at the three things. What are we hunting? What are we protecting? And what are we growing?
Right.
That is what I think we all need to know. I was saying earlier, but that's what every Maasai child knows. They're hunting recognition. They're hunting to be loved, to be appreciated,
Yeah.
to be heard. We all want to be heard. Are we being heard? Do we know what we're hunting? And I think we're also hunting honor as well. And I think, therefore, what are we growing? I think what are we growing? Our wisdom, our knowledge, and our experience, our friendships, our relationships. And, is our organization growing it? Does it, what they're growing, does it make us feel proud? And then I think what we also need to know, the hunt, protect, the hunt, grow, and then protect. We're protecting our integrity. We're protecting our values. So it's really asking people, first of all, even before they think about the map, maybe that's big mammoth that they're chasing in their life. What is it that big idea that they want? And we do a lot with children. And what we say, yes, think about that mammoth you really want to achieve in your life. But mammoths are extinct. Kids go, yeah, yeah, I know. So that's because the environment changes. Now, what we want you to do is never forget your big idea. Never forget your idea to go extinct in your life. So we're starting to embed it in people that they have that authority, that big dream. So that's why I believe people need to know what they're hunting. What are they really, really growing? And are they nurturing that in their health, how they feel, and therefore, what are they actually responsible for? So
Yeah.
you've got to know your hunt, protect, and grow. And then you've got to use the power of your personality, the wealth of your life experience, and then you know how you contribute. And I believe that is then the essence of what we then created. And what I then have been trying to do over the last 30, 20 years is to bring people around this fire, this big fire. When they come around it, we'll give them a map and help them think about what they're hunting, protecting, and growing. So really what we do before we actually ask people to start really drawing the maps, we ask them to sort of think about, so the icon of a mammoth, put it somewhere on the page, draw a mammoth, whatever it looks like. Just how do you see that? And where is it? And what is it? And what does it feel like emotionally? And then think about what's between you and that mammoth. Is it a river? Is it full of sharks? Is it full of fish that you can do? How will you get to that mammoth? So we start taking people through the different core icons that we've created. So really for hunting, it's yes, the mammoth. And I know it's hunting mammoths and it's all the rest, but it just seems to be deep inside everybody's psyche and anybody else. And once people can realize actually we don't want to hunt the mammoth, what we really want to do is to grow the skills, grow the love, grow the connections, grow our relationships to feel relevant. Our clients are not there to help us make money, they're helping us grow. We're not hunting the Ferrari, we're trying to get status from it. So I think we need to realize that all we want to hunt is to be loved. Then we can start to work out what is it we need to grow in ourselves, in our communities. Who do we bring around the fire? And then how do we make everybody feel protected and secure?
Mm.
So that's really where we start. And that's sort of my map is how do we bring people towards this idea?
So you're making sure people have got firstly got the ladder on the right wall.
Yeah.
Um, because I always remember probably maybe 18 years ago now, I was working with a particular company and one of their guys had been doing some coaching with, and then there was opportunities to do lots more work, which I kind of did. But I always remember one of them saying to me, he said, it's really interesting talking to you because you're really interested in improving the world and making a difference. All I care about is maximizing the amount of money that I can bring in for me and my family.
Yeah, but that's successful. That's what we've been educated. That's white
Uh,
man's poison.
yeah, yeah. Yes, I didn't work with them much longer after that. I was just so deflated me actually to see because that was a culture, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and fine. I mean that's absolutely fine. Look at the City of London. Look at anything they can define themselves. There's nothing wrong with that, and we're not going to change it. But I just remember once doing a mapping session with the telesales girls and they call themselves the girls. Otherwise, I wouldn't use that. But the telesales girls for a marketing company or for a manufacturing company. That's right, it's a manufacturing company up north. And the telesales all agreed on one map, which was they were being driven down the river. There was where they used to hunt was now a desert. There was a brand new forest that they could go in that was full of opportunities. But the senior management was simply all sitting around hugging each other and didn't actually come and talk to anybody. And when I showed that to the management, they just said, well, what on earth would the telesales girls know about the business?
Mm. Yeah, the small boy sees the hyena first.
Correct. And I think that is, yeah, it's a new way of looking at things. I mean, it is, yeah, and as I say, I think it's deep inside us. And as I was mentioning, as we're working with neuroscientists on this and trying to see if this is tapping into our genetic memory. And that's what I believe we're doing. I'm actually talking to the Royal Institute of the Blind, who seem to be quite interested, because I'd love to see how do blind people see their world and their territory. We've been working with an amazing woman who is 18, who is a self-selected mute. So she doesn't talk to anybody. She just doesn't speak, deliberately doesn't speak for the trauma she's been through. But her maps, the depth of the swamps, the isolation, but that fire that she wants to bring people around and the trees that she wants to water and plant. So it just lets everybody talk about that they can feel relevant, loved, and when people are talking about their maps that they've drawn, they're talking about the most important person in the world, of course, which is themselves.
Mm. Mm. And I'm thinking now about I'm thinking now about the maps as an individual
Yeah.
um, creating creating maps. And what it seems to me, from what I'm understanding here, is that you might have a map of your territory, of your life, but actually you could have lots of maps, couldn't you?
You do. And lots of people draw lots and lots of
Yeah,
different maps. I mean, I know
yeah.
someone who updates it every 3 or 4 months of what they do, whether it's a business map or a personal map.
Mm,
Oh yeah, and it can be used for project management. It can be used phenomenally for onboarding of a new executive, so they can see how everybody sees the territory. I mean, we once did it in Hong Kong for JLL. The chap who used to run Hong Kong had been given the whole of the Asia Pacific region. So instead of coming in and saying, "Hey, I'm your new boss. This is what you got to do," he said, "You're all doing brilliantly. Could I see your maps and where you need help and resources? Because I've got them and I will give them to you."
mm,
So therefore, the entire conversation was completely different. It was, how can I help you, opposed to I'm your boss.
right.
And lets the new person in see how everybody perceives how they see the business. We're also looking at using it for interviews for instead of a CV, which is all AI created, draw a map. When in your life have you had to lead people across rivers?
Mm,
What have you actually done that made you feel really, really proud on your map? Why? What was the greatest sense of failure or the sense of lesson? Where did you learn something that you can be useful to my company? So it can work for individuals, for companies, for anybody.
mm. And what about people who think I can't draw?
Everybody says that. Everybody says they can't do it. And most people just draw stick people, and it doesn't really matter. There is no right or wrong. I remember once in Japan doing it with a English school in Japan, and the one person just drew a line between England and Japan. It was just a single black line. Said, clearly, I don't understand this mapping system. And but there doesn't seem there meant to be communication between both of us, and nothing seems to come down the line or go back up it. That was a 1 hour conversation because that was the nub of what was important.
Yes.
Because with maps, people cannot draw detail and they cannot draw what's not important.
Right.
And therefore they're talking about what is really actually their issues.
Yes.
And they've never thought about it. Nobody's ever thought they've got a map inside them.
Mm.
I mean, nobody's more amazed than I am each time people draw something that seems to make them feel proud, relevant, and that they can communicate who they are to others.
Yes. Yes. So by being creative in creating something that's visual, and allows you to start to ask some of the questions that are important.
I think that's it, and that you've probably never asked yourself before. I
Mm.
mean, in Dubai, we did it at school. We said, so what wisdom, knowledge, and experience do you need to have a purposeful, well-lived life? And what does your world look like? And from year 6 to year 12, they could articulate it.
Mm.
Another time I remember doing it with a school in Norfolk, and none of the students could see beyond going to college. There was literally no sense of their world beyond that. So it lets the teachers, the students, the parents see what those ambitions are.
Mm. Mm. And is it possible to create something like this digitally so people can, they also got like a paint palette of different icons, and they can create a
I think
visual.
it can do. This is where I want to talk to the neuroscientists because I think I mean, there seems to be a lot of research that when you actually pick up your hands and you start
Yes.
to draw
Yes.
something, you're actually thinking. I mean, I've done it in the past where we've had sort of stickies of, the mammoths and the things, and people can put it around the page.
Mm.
That also seemed to be very, very successful. And some people have drawn on their iPads or they've moved things on their iPads. I mean, I'm not going to say anything is right or wrong. I just think it's letting people tell a story that is relevant to them. That's what I think we all need. So, and people can use it in any way that they want to do it, but we're obviously, training people up on how they can do it and what they can do. Coaches and consultants are using it. We're now getting the latest AI to actually read the maps, which is slightly worrying for some people. And the AI can then pick up, and because it's simply an aid to help people see a reflection of their own goodness. I mean, that's the only thing we want to bring across.
Yes. Yes. Visual aspect's good. A number of years ago, I was working with a important and fifth generation family business,
Mm.
and I had the privilege of going to the family home to present the vision for a new development. They had 90 acres of land that we were working on and evolving, and I was playing a leadership role in this project. And one of the managing directors of the company said to me, "How about presenting this with fuzzy felt?" And so the fuzzy felt, these like sticky
Yeah,
cards that you put onto a map. And it was so because I think Richard, the owner, I think he likes fuzzy felt.
yeah.
So we go to the family house. Now I bring out the picture in fuzzy felt, and his sister suddenly piped up, "Oh, you so love your fuzzy felt when you were a little boy." It was so funny. And he was like, shut up. But it went down so well because he could visually see it. But like your map, what it did is that fuzzy felt took him back to a map of when he was a child, really. It took him back to his childhood and to his roots.
I think there is a lot of taking people back to the challenge. I'll never forget once in Japan, my very, very, very first outdoor team building program in June 89. It poured with rain. And I mean, we had the head of HR for one major American company as an assistant. And on the final day, they had to run around of getting frogs and things, picking things up. And I remember watching this chap running through the fields with a net chasing frogs, thinking this is the complete end of my entire business. It's never going to work. He came back and we did the debrief. He said, I have never been happier since I was 9 years old. It has taken me back. It has let me be playful. It has let me. And I think this is what it does. And I think and this is why I want to see the neuroscientists, because I believe we're sort of tapping into a brain that is just so waiting to be playful. Come on, like
Mm.
the Maasai kids of any age, the songs, the laughter, the welcome, the reason, the purpose, the
Yeah.
why don't we have it?
We're adults dancing around the fire.
Yeah,
Each night, the joy and the community and the
yeah,
togetherness.
yeah. Yeah, we sort of lost our songs. I remember we'd climb Mount Kenya and there were about 20 of us, and we had about 40 porters. We said, could you sing a song about the mountains could you sing us another song about the beautiful women and the goats? And then they looked at us and they said, what's your song?
Song, yeah.
Uh, I mean, had we had the Welsh or the English, but I mean, English is very much a language of sort of colonizing and orders. And it's not really the culture of songs, etc.
No,
Um, and I think, the depth of song, music, art is just with the Aboriginals or it's just embedded
yes.
in a natural thing. And a final thing, the woman we're working with in Australia, I think I showed you her photographs, Elizabeth, she's an Aboriginal woman. And the chap I'm working with on this project went to see her and she'd drawn some amazing maps. And she said, yeah, Anthony's methodology rather confused me for a bit because he's talking about relevance and things like that. Well, we've had that for 60,000 years. So why is he talking about
Well, on that note, I'm gonna have to end it there because we've come to the end of the interview. But I found that really fascinating, Anthony. Got us thinking about mapping our territories and about the importance of relevance and not pursuing trinkets. Those things that are really important. People should be hunting. To be recognition and honor and love and growing their wisdom and their knowledge and also looking to protect things like their integrity and their values. So thank you very much for joining us today. Been absolutely fascinating. And where would you like people to go to find out more?
Well, they'd like to just email me. It's Anthony at nomadic, Nomadic School of Business.com. My website is www.nomadic School of Business. And if they want to find a bit more of the story, they can actually go onto YouTube and just key in Anthony Willoughby and all the TEDx talks and the backgrounds of what I've been doing in Papua New Guinea and how the ideas and all the misadventures I've been on will come through. Because I'm not an anthropologist, I'm not an academic, I'm just someone who's tried to find out what does it mean to be relevant and to be alive. And I'm 75 in a month, so I'm trying to sort of maintain that energy forever. And that's how I've lived my life.
You've lived an amazing life. It's an inspirational one. So thank you for sharing it. I've enjoyed hearing some of the adventures and the places you've been and the thoughts that you've had and the people that you've met. Long live that freedom in your life and enjoy your 75th birthday.
Thank you very much indeed. Much appreciated. Thank you so
Any
much.
questions or comments, people can always write to me at chris@chriscooper.co.uk. You can get in touch with Anthony. Do check out his website. Do check out Nomadic School of Business, and you and look on YouTube, and you'll see examples of the different maps and things that people have drawn, which might help you as well in your thinking and the evolution of your own. And if you're a company, Anthony works with organizations, with big ones, helping people to map out what's truly important to them in their for their people and personally and for their businesses. So feels very worthwhile. So take care, everybody. Be back with you again next week, and have a great week. Go out and do some good and ensure that your ladder is up